get started. So let's review what we did yesterday, or what we should have kind of learned. We talked about the difference between program and course outcomes, objectives. Interchange those words. And we're basically talking about student goals. What we want our students to learn in our course and in our program. We analyzed the verbs to make sure that they were sound and observable and measurable. We also chit-chatted about effective objective. Assessing somebody's understanding needs to be something that you can see or that they can show you. After that, we kind of looked at were our course objectives aligned with our program. So if we're teaching a specific objective in our course, where does it fit into our program? Does it fit into our program? And today we're going to extend that down even deeper into what we do in class. So what we do in class is it support the course objective that also supports the program objective. Now, you can't go through an FDI with me as the Director of Instructional Technology without talking about theory. We just can't. I just have to share that part with you. So I'm going to talk about this activity model that I created. And I'm going to take the first part of this and kind of talk about it from a theoretical, conceptual point of view. And then I'm going to run through an example of how this model can assist you in designing instruction and selecting activities that support your objective. After we go through that example, I'm done. If you want to sit and work on your class and find an activity and kind of use this method to try something new, I would challenge everybody here to try one thing, one instructional strategy that you've never done before. Just one. In all the classes that you teach every day, your whole load, one activity, try something new. And that way you just keep on learning. How this ended up happening, this activity model, was through an observation. I've talked to you about TPAC before. TPAC is the nature of knowledge required by teachers for technology integration. Now, I'm going to do a disclaimer here. This presentation is kind of geared towards integrating new technologies in your classroom for somebody who may or may not be doing that already. But I want to point out that any tool that you use is a piece of technology in your classroom. So yesterday, I gave you all a picture for you guys to talk and draw, right? So that little picture was a piece of technology because it facilitated and made that activity possible and easier, right? So when we're talking about technology here, I don't want you to just only consider things that plug in, but anything that you use in your class that makes learning facilitated. So as an instructor, as a teacher, you have to know your content. You have to know the teaching methods that are most effective for your content. So, for example, Becky Briley teaches English. Her teaching methods are going to be different than Cynthia's, who's teaching biology. Two different subjects, two different ways of knowing, two different types of teaching. And then your technological knowledge. Now, here again, technological knowledge, if we were talking about unplugged, would basically be strategy knowledge. Okay, what instructional strategy or tool are you using to facilitate your students' learning. And so this is all dependent, of course, on our context. I didn't put the little monsters down there, but every class is different. So every content class is different. Every set of students you have is different. So your knowledge level has to fluctuate within that specific environment. But what I have found is this, I see people are thinking of these things as separate entities. I know my content. I teach it this way. I know how to use the computer, and then, or a sheet of paper, or a pencil. But what the problem is most of the time when me, are training you, we fail to kind of make it all relate. So in the past, and I'm guilty of this, we've come in and we've said, hey, look at this great tool, and we show you how to use it, and we send you on your way. Well, what good does that do? All right? So what this particular model of instruction does is it kind of fuses this all together. So regardless of what training you're doing, we're going to have that tech petting zoo. There's going to be some incredible technologies that you can use in your classroom. That's where you're going to pick up how, or what they do, the rules, what to click next, that sort of thing. But this particular model will I hope, help you think about how to incorporate it into your teaching and how it can support your content. So here's the theory. Activity theory. Has anybody heard of activity theory? Activity theory. Okay. So activity theory is basically a theory, and it started with human-computer HCI interaction. I was going interface, and I knew that wasn't the right word. I knew that wasn't. I knew it was inter. And so it was talking about humans interacting with technology. But if you think about it and think about your classroom, it can easily be applied there too. So it's about who is doing what and how are they doing it. And so now we're talking about the key word here. I mentioned this a lot yesterday, is doing. What do those verbs and your objectives imply? Your students are doing something. So by using this particular model, I don't know what's next. Hold on. Nope. All right. So real quick overview. I'm not getting in depth, but the division of labor piece down here is like what we're all kind of assigned to do, our roles within the classroom. In the classroom, this can be community context. Each one of those is different depending on all those other things. We do have style rules. We have classroom rules. People come in with their own rules. And so these are all considerations of how people do things. The subject, that's your people. Okay, that's not the subject matter. The object is what you're doing it to. And then the outcomes is, of course, student learning. The tools, I don't have to explain that. They're what we are doing it. Okay, so the core of an activity. So this is just that middle thing. The tools, they can vary depending on the rules, the community, all that kind of depends on the context itself. But what you have in the core of a single activity is you have the subject, who's doing it, the student. You have the object, what is it that they're doing? Are they discussing something? Are they creating something? So it's not necessarily the learning objective. It's what that verb is telling you that your students are going to do, okay? And then the outcomes is the result of student learning. And when you integrate a technology or a strategy or a tool, that piece becomes the how. All right, how are we going to do all of this? With what? are we doing all of this? Now, I need to stop this for a minute. So, one of the handouts that I gave you are learning activity types, okay? If you did not get one, they're right here. Hoffer is the researcher, went through, there was about 7 of them, and they went through every subject, and pretty much brainstormed, thought of any activity that a teacher would do in their class for any of those subjects, and came up with a taxonomy, okay? Here's the learning activity. I need my students to read a text. Here's a description of what that means, and then to help teachers select the right technology or the right strategy, they listed potential technologies in that far right column, okay? Now, with higher ed, we can't delineate activities via subject because y'all teach some weird stuff, okay? However, what we all teach to is the levels of learning of Bloom's taxonomy, regardless of if you're clinical or not. At some point in the ball game, your objectives will have those words in them. So Hoffer did kind of expand and start doing this with higher ed, and he's the one who pulled okay, I'm going to organize this through Bloom's taxonomy. And what you have here is an unfinished document, because we're never going to run out of teaching strategies. You know, we'll take one and maybe alter it, and that's a new one. So, but what you have here are activities based on levels of Bloom. So yesterday, remember that taxonomy table we did the boxes and stuff? Okay, now you're going to go back and you're going to look at where they are, what levels they are, and then you can reference this when we start to pick out activities of things you need your students to do. So that's what that table is. And slideshow from current. So that is the learning activity type taxonomy. My plan is when everybody gets chill, gotta get our machines running. Right now our machines are not running. But once our machines are running and we're all in our groove and doing our thing, my plan is to continue growing this chart. And my ultimate plan is to have you all collaborate with me. So you may think of a strategy, you throw it up, you put it on there, and then this document will be available and keep growing within our Midway community, or you can take it wherever you want. But you see what I'm saying? Now we have a resource that we can build together. It doesn't just have to be me. Yes?
What is the difference between the learning strategy and teaching strategy?
Okay, so a learning strategy and a teaching strategy. A teaching strategy to me would be the act that I do, the activity that I select to facilitate the content from me, the book, and you. Your learning strategy would be, in my opinion,
My own strategy that I just...
right, note cards, graphic organizers.
So two strategies should, be integrated.
Yes, they should work together.
Know my strategies and I better know yours.
Right, exactly. So, LATs for short, because after a while that, we shorten everything in education. I've already kind of explained how the structure of the chart is. Are there any questions about that chart? You have this is the part, what your students are doing. Do you want them to read? Okay, well, that tells you. And then where are some of the places tools we can use to make those happen? Now, back to our model, okay? Back to our activity theory model. These are the whats. What are we having our students do? Those are the hows. How are they going to do that? How are they going to read the text? Now, I like theory. I love models. I think part of it is because I really like diagrams. I think for me, speaking of learning strategy, that's my strategy, is to get it diagrammed out visually on a piece of paper. And when going through your activities that you have in your class, you have some decisions to make. And what I'm hoping this will do is kind of frame your decisions so that every choice you make, you're falling back on that objective. And so now you're making decisions based on that objective. Therefore, the activities you select are aligned and getting them in the right direction. So you're getting ready to see a funky looking diagram. I worked on this for weeks. Like, I don't know any other way to make it. It's crazy. It looks like my house. But the squares are the actions needed to reach the goal. The goal would be your learning objective, okay? The little triangles is because not only do students need to take in content, but they need to practice it. So we've got to provide practice activities. And then here's where they take it in. Now, information needed. So that's taking in the content, practicing the content, showing you know the content. The one thing I want to point out about everything I just said, in each case, the student is doing something. So at any point, we need to have an activity for our students to do, to receive information, to practice, and to show us that they know it. So you start with program goals, right? Course goals. And then within each course, you may have a time where, and we're coming in, the students grab the information, they practice it for you, they show you that they know it, we've obtained the goal. Each one of these lines is an assessment point, okay? Because you're making sure they got the content, they're making sure they practiced it correctly, and they're making sure we're testing them to see if they really, really got it. Now, that's a kind of a linear approach to instruction, but we all know teaching isn't like that. Sometimes they got to get information from a couple of places. Well, they only need to practice it once because it's really just one thing they have to do. They just have to grab information from different sources. And then they show you that they know it. Other times, there's really only one place we can get information, and we're going to practice it, but it actually shows us two different goals that we're trying to reach. So, you know, this is kind of the best deal here. Buy one, get two, you know, buy one activity, get two objectives mastered. Those are the best ones that you can have.
Can information needed and student practice be combined at some time?
Yes, yeah. So these little dots, if you played on Microsoft PowerPoint, when you connect two figures, you can move them up so they're touching. I don't have animation, but maybe I'll do that for my next presentation. But yes, yeah, like, again, I'm not isolating these. These aren't isolated in silos, but they're just representations of the things that we do with our students. And our representations of what we do is based on that content, our context. So these lines can get closer or not be there at all. They can sit on top of each other, but they're still receiving information and they're still practicing at the same time.
The two blue squares,
Yeah,
are those two different actions that lead to the same learning outcome?
your choice. It can lead to two different learning outcomes. Because we can give students information that cover multiple objectives. We can give students multiple pieces of information that only work on one objective. So all of this, again, this is why I had a really hard time with the model, because it's so flexible and it's so fluid depending on your context. And then this one would be indicative of you give your students, they get the information, it's a really, really hard concept. So they need lots of opportunities to practice before they can show you that they know it. And so, yeah, that's it. It makes a lot more sense when you explain it than when you're just looking at it. Now, I will say I took this idea from an instructional designer who works only in the business corporate community world. And so like when you are operating a business or, okay, bloodborne pathogens, that training that we all have to take every now and then, or if a new company gets a new system and they want to train, they'll hire an instructional designer to come design the training because they want people that it's mastery only. And this lady developed a model very similar to this, and because she said this, I had to buck up. I had to be like, no. She said that this model will only work for business. It will absolutely not work for education. And to me, that was a challenge. And so that actually was the motivation behind that crazy picture. Because I was like, oh yeah, it can. It can. And I think it does do a really good job. What you can't do with this diagram is see the flexibility in how all the pieces move. But I'll work on my animation and PowerPoint for that. All right, are there any questions about the model? Because now I'm going to show you how to use it for your purposes. Does anybody else? Y'all have asked some really good questions today. I like thinking like that a lot. Okay.
I was wondering what the why was. Why did she say, they say it didn't work?
I have no idea, but I couldn't stand it, so I just had to stop. Don't tell it. Like, I'm not an aggressive or challenging person, but there are a few things that make me tick, and that bothered me because I'm like, you're wrong. And I think it's because she didn't understand the education world. Like, and to me, that bothered me. And you can pretty much make anything work in here, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to apply. There's my friend again. Maybe I'll get a tattoo. I'm just kidding. All right, so what you're seeing here is Ellen Bloomfield creating two separate PowerPoint presentations, but not really having the time to make one. I tried to make a little transition here, but we'll see. So sorry for the color switch. That just didn't happen. So now we're going to kind of look at this, and I'm going to walk you through the steps, and we're going to do a really simple practice activity. After we get done with the practice activity, I will help you apply this to an activity that you want to do for your class, or you can do whatever. But at least you'll know you have the knowledge. So we have gained information. I've provided you with some needed information, and now we're going to apply that information, and we're in the little green triangle. We're going to practice it together. This was given, well, it was prepared for a workshop for our Midway 101 peaks, but that never came to fruition, but now you get it. So in the workshop, I would have you have, just like you guys, bring your stuff, and we do the same thing. We're going to align learning activities to student outcomes. We're going to use the taxonomy LATs, and then we're going to select our stuff and roll on. All right, so this handout is used for, I would say, framing this, and it may not resonate with you. You may just want to write something down on a sheet of paper, and that's fine. I'm not really sold on this format just yet. I've only done this a couple of times, but it at least guides me to getting the point across. All right, so the key elements designing instruction based on this particular model. Number one, we got to have strong learning outcomes. We have to identify knowledge and practice points for our students. We have to kind of think about tools and resource selection, and then consider assessment points. Now, this is a little bit different than what we discussed yesterday with Wiggins and backwards design, okay? Notice in backwards design, the assessment piece comes first. If you are designing a course from scratch, this model is not for you. If you are designing a course from scratch, you really need to do the Wiggins backwards design method, start with your objective assessments, and then roll on through. But here, we're going to work under the assumption that you have a course and you just need to make improvements on it. So this is more of an improvement model, less than a construction model, which is why the assessment's at the end. And also, when you're redesigning a course, I have found that pretty much most of the time, the major assessment pieces stay the same. And so, that's why we kicked it to the end. Okay, so student-centered outcomes are a key. I'm not saying any more about this. Our course is dead. We did enough yesterday. But does everybody understand? Student learning outcomes. If you don't have one of those strong verbs, this isn't going to work, okay? So you've got to look at your verb. You've got to become intimate and personal with that verb. The verb is asking the students to do something. Discuss, determine, create, illustrate. The verb is what the students will show you. When they do it, they show you, they demonstrate that they can do what that verb is asking them to. So here we go. Describe daily activities and hobbies using present tense verbs. So we're going to just take a minute. We're going to take a minute and we're going to talk about that verb. So what is the verb? Describe. All right. Give me some synonyms for that word. Explain. Articulate. Discuss. So when you are describing, what are your students, what are you doing? What act are you doing? As a human, I'm describing, what am I doing?
You're showing knowledge.
Talking, writing. What other ways can we describe?
You can create like a visual model like that.
Okay. So you see, you're thinking, right now, you're doing what you're supposed to do. That verb says describe. And what can students do to show you that describe? Okay? And that's kind of the thought process you want to maintain throughout this whole gig. And I think when it comes to teaching, and I can be just as guilty as this as anybody else, because there's just days you don't feel it. I feel it today though, but I really like instructional strategy. I think we get in a rut where describe means they have to write a paper. And we don't think outside that silo because we're just comfortable in that silo. And here again is where I'm going to challenge you. Don't just sit and be comfortable. Don't. It's more fun on the other side anyway. So identify one course SLO, analyze the verb, and determine the different ways in which students can learn that objective. So if you have an objective in front of you from your course, let's talk about it. Somebody give me a verb.
Identify.
Identify. So what ways can our students identify the site point? There it is.
Labeling figures.
Huh?
Labeling figures.
Labeling figures.
Sorting into categories.
Sorting into categories. Give me another verb. Come on. Drink more coffee.
Compare.
Compare. All right, this is a good one. Let's think about all the different ways we can compare things. Which ways can we compare? Oh, are you stuck? I've got something for you.
Graphic organizer.
Hey, look. Compare.
Eye shape, color.
What? I think that's analyze. Yeah. So, compare would be kind of categories, like organize. You can use
She
spreadsheets
said
for that.
graphic organizer and diagram.
Yeah, the diagrams. Okay. All right, but do you see how the thought process is you are looking at the verb only. You're not even looking at what we want them to describe or what you want them to carry. You're thinking about the act of a human doing that action. All right, next. Knowledge and practice. After determining the learning goals, which we already had, so if again, we're good there. The learning goals help shape the learning experience. It's time for you to choose the building blocks. And the building blocks are where are they obtaining the knowledge and when or where and how are they going to practice. So you've got some decisions to make here. What foundational knowledge is needed to support? How are they going to get it? And back here on that chart, read text. All right, don't forget, there's other ways to obtain that type of information. I know a lot of you all are now using videos as part of your content delivery piece. So you don't have to be limited to how your students, you don't have to be limited to a textbook. Practice. In what ways are we going to give them time to gain experience through practice? What activities can you use to facilitate knowledge acquisition? That actually should go under the other one, but it didn't. So let's go back to our example here. Describe daily activities and hobbies using present tense verbs. So in a supposition kind of thing, but how would our students get this type of knowledge? What type of knowledge do they need to know in order to obtain this objective?
This is out of context for me, so help me understand this. So right now we're pretending that this is.
So just look at the
an
words.
objective.
Don't think context. Look at it's an objective.
But activities and hobbies to me are two completely different things.
That's fine. So what verb are they having? What's the verb to describe? What are they asked to describe? Activities and hobbies. Okay? Using what? Verbs. Okay, so what foundational knowledge are our students going to have to know to be able to describe daily activities and hobbies using present tense verbs?
Well, then
Yeah, they have to know present tense verb.
Vocabulary for. They have to know what a hobby is.
They have to know what a hobby is. Hopefully they
have vocabulary.
They have to have vocabulary. And so now, those are all the pieces of knowledge gathering. I know it says Spanish, but it could be, English as far as I'm concerned, but, so we know now, it's a basic, what our students have to know. And so that same exercise that we just did, I don't know if you were listening to me, I was like, just look at the words, don't worry about the context, okay? And now we're going to figure out where our students need to get their information from. And then practice, same thing. Describe. What actions are students doing if they are describing something? And then you go through that whole thought process again, just like we did a few minutes ago. Synonyms really work here, and I am not kidding. I have looked at my learning objective, and not only do I have learning objectives in my class for the whole course, I have weekly objectives. And so what I have done in the past, if I didn't like an activity that didn't work, I will go and Google describe synonym just to see if anything pops, a different word might give me a different thought of a different strategy. I love me some thesaurus.com. What?
I'm just, context kind of does matter, and it's the context of the kids' backgrounds, your students' backgrounds, because.
Then that will aid in your selection of where to get the knowledge and the practice
Because
activity.
the word hobbies
Mhm.
is very class and situationally defined. So like great Aunt Char, when she made quilts back during the Depression, it wasn't a hobby.
Right.
It was a practical task
Okay.
that had to be
Let
done.
go of the word hobby and let's put describe food.
There you go.
There we go. Describe food. Let go of the word hobby. All right. So takeaway application. Consider the foundational knowledge and identify opportunities for practice and self-assessment. Here is where, if we were in a couple-hour workshop, we were actually redesigning your course, we'd stop, and now you would start looking at the chart, looking at your curriculum, looking at your instructional choices that you made, and trying to change one based on, some new activities to, got to keep it fresh, got to keep that relationship fresh. Now, assessment. You can employ a number of different activities and types of formative and summative assessment. I think the focus here for you should be not the summative. Because again, if you're redesigning your course or you're strapped by accreditation people, your assessment, your summative assessments are pretty much chosen for you. Formative assessments, however, assessing your students along the way can become a very powerful tool. And these activities that you select, especially the practice activities that you select, can inform you, if you're paying attention, of things that are working and strategies that aren't. And that's, like I told you with my geometry experience, I would know that they weren't getting it because we'd be working the problems in class. And that, to me, was my formative assessment, that I need to get back and do something about it. Notice not once did I ever say it's the student's fault. Now, if you have your one kid that's not doing it, then that's his fault. But if your majority of your class isn't getting it or failed the test, it's not your student. It's A, the assessment method, or B, the instructional method. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Okay? And so these formative assessment pieces are super important. Super, super important. And you remember in the diagram, all those little white lines? That kind of represented the formative assessment piece all along the way to a goal. Now, if I were to redraw that after having said what I just did, I may have 2 or 3 white lines coming out of a single practice box, okay? You're not limited there. But be aware that, and I think this is the point I would make. When you have your students doing something in class, they're doing it to learn the material, but you're doing it so you can learn your student and whether they got it or not. So you don't just get it and walk away and be like, helping them if they need help. That's fine. I mean, that's what we do. But paying attention and being aware of where they're struggling while doing it, you can probably catch some misconceptions and fix them before they take that summative assessment. So after we go through all of this and we filled out this sheet here, and we've picked out these, at least one new type of activity, instructional activity for the year, and we're looking at them. Now we go back and say, okay, I'm going to pay attention to this here so I know if my students have got it. So intentional thinking about where, because you know better than anybody else what concepts your students struggle with the most. And at that point, you really want to make sure you're focused on paying attention at those critical points in either information gathering, practice, or assessment. Let's see. So after we get done, at this point in the workshop, we tighten up we've been brainstorming the whole time, and I have this list of tools, and I may want them to instead of write a paper, I may want them to blog. And we've all talked about and brainstormed these ideas. Now's the point where we say, okay, we're committing. This is what my students are going to try, and this is what they're going to do. And we formalize it and then get ready to teach. Whoopsie, that's the wrong way. You all don't want that. So you've sequenced them, you've identified assessments, and again, this is where we will kind of make sure we picked out the right supporting technologies, plugged in or not plugged in, and get ready to, look what that did. It wasn't like that when I looked at it last time. Have y'all ever noticed that? Like sometimes you'll put a PowerPoint up and then you go to a different thing. Questions? All right. Does anybody have any questions?
I have
Yes.
a question, but it's actually just, it builds on what you were talking about, that when you get to that, whether it's formative or the summative types of assessments, that over the years, the one thing that's always come out for my students is they want more choice. All right. And so that idea of saying that you just are going to say there's only one possible formative assessment you can do, or there's only one possible summative assessment. The idea of saying maybe it's created on on a matrix that one of these three things, for example, would because it's amazing to me how one student who actually knows the material has difficulty showing that knowledge in one way, but given another way to do it can really excel.
You know what? You just like. Those are called instructions for us. So again, back to my previous slide, I can identify with that too. So I taught the lowest level mathematics. I had freshmen in high school who had third and fourth grade reading levels. So word problems were really kind of until East Africa. And then, and what I found was because of the way this system is, that they wouldn't excel in a regular math class because that paper and pencil and testing situation, they didn't have the cognitive ability to get what was here through here onto here. However, when they sat at my desk and I said, how do you solve this problem? They could explain it all the way through. So it was the act of writing it down, that extra level of, it's not that they didn't know it. They didn't know how to show the steps. And if you've been in a math class with some math teachers before, that freaks them out. Where's your work? And those people aren't going to operate that way. And so I agree, the student and the student choice piece, we just did for our new faculty, a presentation on teaching to different generations, and I'm going to tell you right now, choice is very important to our people coming in here. Hashtag your team. They need their choices, okay? So we want to allow them, when they go into the real world, they're going to have to make choices. Professional, content-driven choices. So by allowing a choice every now and then, I realize some things we don't have choice about. Like there are some things I don't want my nursing students to choose. Okay, I get that. But at some point, they are going to have to make an intellectual, kind of content-driven choice, and we need to train them for that as well.
Universal design for learning is a real good plan that shows you how to do this. It basically boils down to differentiation. I'm more of a kinesthetic visual learner, so I might want to do something more hands-on and visual, whereas an auditory person may want to do a presentation. So we have to factor in a lot of things. It's not just in public school or private school. That's in college too. We have to learn how to differentiate even for our students that are coming into the college world.
Well, and where this is taking me is, are we going to get to the point, because this has come up in conversations with courses that we're designing right now in education, is are we going to allow students more than one option for a final product? And the summative assessment. And if we're going to do that, then we get into the validity and the reliability of these instruments to ensure that they're assessing for the same concepts and constructs. But, and this comes in part because we have secondary and primary and middle school teachers who, if they have to design cross-curricular content in a unit, it's going to look different.
Right.
But so you can say, do a unit, but in terms of how we assess it, we can't use the same criteria
Right.
that we would use with an elementary teacher as we would with a high school teacher.
Well, I will say
So-
this with regards to UDL, flashback. We tried to do a UDL training last fall at FDI, but Sarah Mudd at her talk on ADA or accessibility
Right.
went over, so we didn't get to it, but maybe I'll throw that back up in January.
It's a good
Yeah.
thing.
UDL, okay, UDL is one of those instructional radicals that I can have a hard time getting out of, so maybe I shouldn't do that to you. All right, yeah. Are there any questions at all? Any at all, okay. I'm done. Thank you. I hope this may help you frame a different way of thinking